I'll call the Election Commission meeting to order for the start of our evening here. Clerk, please call the roll.
Commissioner Icoangeli?
Here.
Signing?
Oh, I'm sorry, she's excused.
That's okay. Germaine? Here. Lamore?
Here.
Felder?
Here.
Whitman? Here. Mayor Clark?
Here. So we have I'll just turn it over to the clerk because we have a few items and some that we do with Election Commission. Clerk Treasurer Lavoy.
And this is, remember, our election commission meeting is mandated by state law, and we will go through the items that we need in order, that we need approved by the election commission, which by our charter is the city council. And we will get those approved so that I can carry on conducting the election here in the city of Monroe. So the first order of business is the approval of minutes from the election commission meeting that was held on Monday, October 7th, 2019. That was just prior to the November 2019 election.
To approve.
Second.
Motion by Commissioner Whitman, supported by Commissioner Icolangi to approve the minutes. Clerk is, thank you.
Commissioner Icoangeli?
Yes.
Germaine?
Yes.
Lamore?
Yes.
Felder?
Yes.
Whitman?
Yes.
Mayor Clark?
Yes.
The next order of business is under commission action. We will need a motion to approve the resolution delegating duties to the clerk treasurer. Again, nothing has changed from previous resolutions.
Make a motion that we make a resolution delegating duties to the clerk treasurer.
Second.
By Commissioner Lamore, supported by Commissioner Felder, to approve the resolution. Of course, that is within the packet here and as stated the same. This is a roll call on this item also. Clerk, please call the roll.
Commissioner Icoangeli? Yes. Germaine?
Yes.
Lamore?
Yes.
Felder?
Yes.
Whitman?
Yes.
Mayor Clark?
Yes.
The next item is to establish the time and location of the absent voter counting board. We'll have one counting board for the presidential primary. It will convene at, on March 10th at 10 a.m. in the former Social Security office on the third floor. So I just need a motion and a second, and then we'll just do an all in favor.
Okay, that's for the establishing the report time and location. Thank you.
Make a motion that we establish the report time and location for the absent voter counting board.
As March 10th at 10 a.m.
March 10. 10 a.m.
Got it. Thank you.
Second.
Motion by Commissioner Lamore, supported by Commissioner Felder, I'm sorry. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed?
Okay. The next item is approval of inspectors. So that you have in your packet a list of election inspectors for each precinct, including the chair and co-chair. You have the AV counting board and you have the receiving board. And so we will, obviously they would all be certified before the election if they aren't already, and there is no conflict because none of their relatives are on the presidential primary ballot.
I'll make a motion to approve the list of inspectors for precinct, AV board, and the receiving board.
Second.
By Councilman Icolangi, Commissioner Icolangi, supported by Commissioner Whitman. This is a roll call vote. Please call the roll.
Commissioner Icoangeli?
Yes.
Germaine?
Yes.
Lamore?
Yes.
Felder?
Yes.
Whitman? Yes. And Mayor Clark?
Yes.
All right, and then finally, we have the public accuracy testing date and participants. That is required by our charter to be a quorum of the election commission. We need to conduct that on Tuesday, March 3rd. And we generally set the time for 10 a.m., although we could adjust it. This will be quite a bit longer than the one we had in November. There are a plethora of candidates on both sides, and we have quite a few combinations of ballots to run through the tabulator, so I would count on 2 hours. Hopefully we would be done before that, but just to be safe, that's what I would.
So those that were on the accuracy test and in this realm previously, recall it took a little longer. This might even be more because there's more names. But so really what we're looking for is one, to set the date and the participants. I know that I'm available and I have it on my schedule to attend. And if I had put down 10 to noon, but if it's something that's going to get our quorum of 4 that's necessary and we need to start at 8 o'clock, I'm open to that as well.
What's the date again?
It's March 3rd, which Tuesday morning, yeah. So we can first see if we have the four commissioners to,
I can do it.
okay.
Volunteer.
Okay, so Commissioner Whitman, Michaelangeli, Germany, and myself, and then we'll have the others that if there's something comes up and there needs to be a call,
Alternates.
we'll have alternates that are there. We can just know that you're available, so.
Very good.
Wonderful. Okay.
With the 10 o'clock time, or would we prefer earlier?
Earlier is fine with me. Earlier is fine with me. We just,
Look at, yeah, if we go with 8 o'clock, that way the day, for I know that some have your business days as well outside the city that might get you there sooner, so.
That's
Why don't
fine.
we do 8 o'clock and if there's something, we can go from there. So the date's March 3rd, 2020. We have the commissioners that were stated, and it will be from 8 a.m. to 10 a.m. is the motion, I guess, or the recommendation.
yeah, so if we could just get a motion
Okay,
to confirm that and a support and then an all in favor.
okay.
A motion that we have our public accuracy testing date as Tuesday, March 3rd, 2020, from 8 a.m. to 10 a.m. And the participants will be Commissioner Whitman, Commissioner Michaelangeli, Mayor Clark, and Commissioner Germaini.
Okay, the motion by Commissioner Lamore, supported by Commissioner Germaini. Clerk, please call the roll.
Commissioner Equangeli,
Yes.
Germaini,
Yes.
Lamore,
Yes.
Felder,
Yes.
Whitman, Mayor Clark.
Yes.
And then under my clerk treasurer comments, the only thing I wanted to, there are two things I wanted to say. One, we have new envelopes for the ballots that are being mailed out. We have sent a release to the paper. We've had it on Facebook, but if there's any thing that any of you can do in just spreading that word, or if someone has concerns that they got something that looked like junk mail, it's colorful, it doesn't look like a standard government envelope, and we just don't want people to throw those away. Because we also have some stricter rules, and if someone does discard their absentee ballot, we will need something in writing from them, so it makes it just a little bit more complicated. So if they can hold on to the original ballot, that would be great. The only other thing is we will be having a May election, and you'll get more information on that later. So all 4 election dates that we could have this year are now all taken, all spoken for.
Okay.
So that's what I have. That's all I have, sir.
Any comments from the commissioners? My only comment is I did see the article regarding the new ballot envelopes, and I thought it was a good article, plus the picture being posted was nice to help, and I'm sure you're doing that with our communications as well for the public. If they have questions about that, obviously they can call the clerk's office, but also it's on our webpage.
Correct.
Any citizens' comments regarding the election commission meeting that we have here? Seeing none? You need a motion to adjourn? Yeah.
Just a motion to adjourn.
Motion to adjourn.
Motion by Commissioner Lamore, supported by Commissioner Germaini to adjourn. All in favor, say aye. Aye. Very good. And
Thank you.
thank you. We're closed for that meeting.
Right.
Ready? Okay, at this time, I'll open the meeting for the work session today. Clerk, please call the roll.
Councilperson Equangeli,
Present.
Vining,
She's excused.
Here.
Here?
Here.
Whitman. Here. Mayor Clark.
So we have a work session agenda, a couple items. Mr. Pastu, I think you're probably going to start us off, and then I don't know, there's probably some information from staff or others that are present.
Thank you, Your Honor. First item we have is a presentation tonight with Waste Management. Pat Greavy, Brian Conaway are present for the presentation tonight. Mike Sapo, our consultant that we've used for refuse, recycling, yard waste-related issues is in the audience as well. The presentation tonight is to provide council with kind of a little update where we are with the recycling industry, and then Waste Management will provide a proposal for council to consider. No action necessary tonight, just listen, and then also discussion related to some prospective service alternatives for us to consider as well. So with that, Mr. Greavy? Yeah.
Good evening, and thank you, Mr. Pastu, and I appreciate the opportunity to stand here this evening and provide you with some information. As indicated, my name is Patrick Greavy. I'm the area manager for Public Sector Solutions for Michigan, Ohio, and Indiana for Waste Management. And again, with me tonight is Brian Conaway. He's the the rep for your contract specifically that works here in the Southeast Michigan area. And the two of us will be providing you info on a couple of topics tonight. One is mentioned recycling and what's been happening with that in the commodity markets and how that's affecting costs and pricing. And then secondly, we want to talk about another trend, which is automated service. There's a big push in the industry right now. We're probably at the front end of leading it in this area and throughout the three states I mentioned to move to automated service where the vehicle does more work than the driver in terms of using an automatic arm to lift the containers and empty them as it drives down the street and picks up those containers at the curb. But before we get to that, I want to talk a little bit about recycling. You've got three documents in front of you. One is a chart that looks like what is up on the screen. There's a second table on the back of that document. Then the second thing is route to innovation and automation. It's our automation guide and just gives some high-level information. And then there's a third document, which is actually a small city up near Ann Arbor, Dexter, Michigan, which recently converted to automated service. So it kind of gives you a sense of what kind of communication goes to the residents when you when you make one of these conversions. So we'll reference those documents throughout the evening tonight. So first, recycle. You've probably read or seen on TV or both and heard about, some people call it a crisis, some people call it a change, some people call it a trend in recycling. But what really happened is at the end of 2017, start of 2018, while this community was in the throes of putting in place its new contract, China, which was one of the largest consumers of recycled material from around the globe, closed its borders to import of recycled materials. So the US, Europe, a number of countries had to find different outlets for their material. It really changed the dynamic of the pricing, what somebody was willing to pay for a bale of recycled material because of the glut of the volume that it put onto the market. China stopped accepting it. Still, people were recycling in the US and everywhere else. So the same volume was there, but with laws of supply and demand, as supply goes up, the price goes down. This chart, which you see up on the screen, really gives you a look at sort of the market for what is called the blended value. So if you think of a bale that had all of the different things that are on the list of recyclable materials in your community, this is the average value that you could get for a bale of that material on the market. So it goes from 15 through 19, but you'll see numbers on there ranging from about $85 a ton. In 2017, it peaked up above $120 a ton. And then you see this sharp decline that you see there on the curve, where by the time we got to November of 19, a bale of recycled material was worth $36 and some change per ton. So there's two things that go into an equation when you're in the recycling business. One, what can you get on the market for a bale of material? And two, how much does it cost, obviously, to produce that bale? And so what you have at the end of the day is if it's $100 a ton to produce a bale and you're getting 120 like you see in Q3 2017, you've got a $20 swing there that's positive. So it cost me $100 to produce the product. I can sell it for 120. I keep $20. Same thing if you look back to where it's about, just above $80. Let's say it's $80. If my cost is 100 and I'm only getting 80, I have to pay, I'm losing $20 basically for every bale I produce. And really for years, if you looked back at this trend before 2015, it floated around. There were some points in time where maybe you're making $20, $30 a ton. And then there were other points in time where maybe it's upside down the equation and it's costing you $30 a ton. But that ebb and flow as it went on kind of operated between that. It was somewhat predictable. Even though it changed, you could average out a trend and say, okay, I can make money in this business. But when you see what happened here when China closed its doors to the commodity market, it really took a long drop down below $40 a ton. So processing costs, if they were $100 a ton, now I'm only getting $30 back. So I've got this big gap, right, of about, $60, $70 that I can sell something for less than what it cost me to produce it. The other thing that happened in there was the buyers started to demand higher quality bales. So when, think about when you recycle in single stream, you put everything in there, right? Then it goes to a plant, it's got to be sorted out. Inevitably, some of that product doesn't get out of there. So if I'm buying a bale of paper, inevitably there's some percentage of plastic in there or some percentage of glass, what have you, because of the way it's collected, right? All in the same truck. And so the buyers really upped their standards, which meant at the same time that you had this curve, processing costs went up. So what before was maybe $100, now it was $130, and you're still facing this downward curve on what you can expect to get for a bale on the market. So you kind of had this, push and pull situation, which wasn't positive at all for producers of recycled material. As I said, this all happened right about the time this contract was put in place. So a lot of the assumptions that we used when we priced your contract, right, and figured out, okay, what's going to be our profit margin, what's going to be our return on our capital, all of those assumptions kind of went out the window when this happened. And so we found ourselves in a situation where, our cost model was upside down. It stayed that way for a prolonged period of time. It's ticked up a little bit. This number now is probably maybe slightly above $40. So that's the good news. We are seeing some signs of life in the market, but all the projections are that, those days of $120 for a bale of recyclable are probably still a long way off. And so I guess to sum that all up for you, the contract in total is worth, if you do the math, units times rate times the number of months, it's about a little over $1 million contract. It's costing us right now, the delta between the processing costs and what you can get for a bale is north of $100. So you have, if we do it in round numbers, you have about a little over 1,000 tons a year. If every ton costs $100, it's north of $100,000 a year of cost in that contract that really nobody could foresee, because nobody really could see China making this drastic of a change and saying, we are shutting the ports and the material just isn't going to be accepted anymore. So I tell you that long story to get to this chart, which is on the back of this one. And if you could change the screen up there. So this chart basically shows you sort of a look at what's happened to cost and what that means per unit. So per residential unit. So remember I talked about back in the day, you could count on maybe I got to pay 30 once in a while, maybe I'll get 30 once in a while. So as we set up this contract, if you go by this chart, let's say that we assumed, look, we might have to pay $30 for every ton we collect. So we'll budget that into the cost that comes up with the price we bid for the contract. What this chart shows you is every time that ticks up another $5, that processing cost above what, let's say if we had budgeted that 30, to offset that, we need about another 7 cents a unit to do that, okay? And this isn't perfect, I show you this as an example. I'll talk about it a little more in a minute. So as that keeps going up every $5, basically the ratio is in your community based on your volume is processing cost rate goes up, net processing $5, need about 7 cents. It goes up another 5, I need 14, 21, and so on. Right now, the net is probably in the range of about that $105 there you see. So we're up over $1 that basically, because of that trend I showed you, that we missed on our assumptions. It's not your fault. It's not our fault. Something happened in the global market that changed the dynamic. But just to give you an example, if you broke it down to, all right, if you were to do it today, I would need another $1.03 from every home to get back to where we plan to be. I guess the question, Vince said, you know, we have a proposal. We're going to a lot of communities with a chart just like this and saying, basically, would you consider this? And, or some version of this. So it might not be this one. It might not start at $30. It might not be 5 cents for 7 cents. $5 is 7 cents. It might be $5 is 6 cents or 5 cents. You know, there's a pretty tight ratio in there that makes sense, but we're open to discussion. I guess the other thing that we want to talk to you about is the automation, instead of just saying, hey, let's talk about this in a vacuum. The other trend that we are really pushing hard in the industry right now for a number of reasons, which Brian will tell you about, is automation. And we think there's a lot of benefits in that for not only ourselves in terms of making ourselves more efficient, more safe, helping our workers to, you know, not have injuries and things of that nature. You know, we think it's a nice alternative for communities to consider, and we'll explain that as well. Just everything from curb appeal, how the community looks on trash day and how that speaks for your brand as a community, to you know, being able to quantify, here's how much service you get for a certain rate. So it lets the communities kind of balance that off. And if you don't mind, I'm going to turn it over to Brian to talk about that for a second, or a few minutes, and then maybe we can do some Q&A about what we've talked about here, if that sounds acceptable.
Very good. Sounds fine.
Good evening, Mayor, City Council.
Morning.
City Administrator, or City Manager, I should say.
Feels like
Brian Conaway, Waste Management Public Sector Solutions Representative. I appreciate the opportunity to appear before you this evening to talk a little bit about the waste management strategies to increase our employee safety, to impact longevity of our employees' careers, and to also look at the impact on the communities with the introduction of 96-gallon trash carts in the city of Monroe. We have really taken a major turn in terms of what's happening on the streets with our employees. A lot of this has occurred because of the distracted driving that we've been experiencing in our industry. There have been a number of rear-end collisions that have actually resulted in the fatalities of our employees and also of the drivers of those vehicles. Many instances, people run into the back of the trucks without even touching their brakes. I took some time to look through some of the national statistics and also to get a very good description of what distracted driving is. I looked at the National Highway Traffic and Safety Administration's website and also the Solid Waste Association of North America, which included Canada and the US. They define distracted driving as drivers on the cell phone, eating while driving, reading, grooming, adjusting their radios, hands-free conversations, and talking to other passengers in the vehicle. Any of these activities have resulted in these fatalities and injuries to our employees and even to other pedestrians. The rear-end collisions that have occurred have impacted people at the site that I work at. We unfortunately lost a young man last year when the driver of a van drove around the truck and hit him as they were trying to pass. He had a broken leg and a broken hip. Unfortunately, he passed during surgery. Well, that still counts as a fatality in our industry. Very unfortunate. One of the other things that I read that I just found startling, it said on average that people, when they text or they read or they're involved in something else, they take about 5 seconds away from the visual that's in front of them. Driving 55 miles an hour, that vehicle can travel the length of a football field as if a person's driving that distance blindfolded, not really seeing what's going on. Excuse me. I further looked at what some of the distractions that occur, and they had 3 different areas that they described. They talked about visual distractions, where the person takes their eyes off the road, manual distraction, where they take their hands off the wheels of the vehicle, and cognitive distraction, which really was something that made me think a lot, where the person's mind is just off of what they're doing, where they're just totally outside of what's going on and what their main reason is behind the wheel of that car. In some of the stats that I read, it said distracted drivers are 23 times more likely to have an accident than someone who's paying attention. 49% of the drivers under 35 send texts or read while driving. 65% of drivers use their cell phones while driving. In 2017, 30 collectors lost their lives during the issues with distracted drivers. That's a lot of people, and that's a large number. And it's a number that we have taken issue with to move towards automated service to try to get another employee off of the street and out from behind at the back of the truck. A couple of the other things that have impacted our business with this full economy that we're seeing, we find that people that have been in our business or work for our companies leave. They have at least 5 years or less in the industry, and they wind up leaving and going to another industry, whether it's a driving, to continue what they do. They don't go to another competitor. They leave the industry altogether. So this automated service that we're trying to present, and that we are presenting, we're trying to improve our ability to keep our employees and to help them with their careers and extend their careers for a longer period of time. What will be some of the benefits to your community with the automated service? And it is in the handout that I provided for you. But some of the things that it talks about is the less litter that communities will see on their streets, because everything is enclosed within the 96-gallon cart, contents of the cart. We also find that with the CNG trucks that we put on the street with the new automated service, it's more quieter and more efficiency in the collection activity. Pat talked a little bit about curb appeal. Some communities are talking about their brands and what their cities look like on collection day. You don't have a lot of containers that are full to the top that may spill over, fall over, or you have animals that access the trash for food. Waste management will provide the cart, and waste management will maintain the cart. And it will be provided for each property address, the same as it was for the recycling rollout. We find that these are much safer for residents to roll out. I think that we have found that a number of the residents who thought they wouldn't like the recycle cart have found out that they actually like it, and it's a lot more easier for them to get it to the curb. And it's a similar experience with the trash cart. It improves collection and efficiencies. We would hope that we would see a reduced number of hours that employees are out on the street servicing with the cart, because it is collected a bit quicker than someone can pick up 3 containers full of trash and take that cart back to the curb. The one activity with the automated service, we would hope would provide that efficiency for the community. We find that these carts, in many communities, they feel that they're attractive. We start to see actually less bulk material at the curb. The part of the automated service does change the bulk activity, where a resident, instead of just setting it all out at one time, they do call in ahead, and we schedule the service so that we don't drive the entire city if we don't need to. We believe that has an impact on your streets and your roads. It is neater and cleaner and more efficient. And we hope that that's something that we can further talk with the administration about in the near future. Thank you.
Thank you. I'll just, Vince, is there anything further, or I have some questions? I'll see if council has questions.
mic on here. Mr. Sapo, is there anything if you wanted to add to it, or just be available for questions if you like?
Whatever your preference is, I can be available for
Okay, so,
Okay, Michelle, I'll start here and then we'll go around.
I see in the packet that you can only put in the bin what you can fit in the bin, and the lid has to close. What additional costs would you put on the homeowner or the city if we had someone, we have a lot of tenants in our city, and they move out? What happens with all that excess garbage? And you arrange for a pickup, does that cost the homeowner?
Yeah, and Brian, feel free to fill in the blanks if I leave any, but so, yeah, the standard service, so, if I'm not mistaken, and correct me if I'm wrong, there's a millage, a tax for your refuse service. So basically, the way the service works is for the residents, mills that they pay, you get the 2 carts, right? And that's the service that's paid for by the city. And then, as Brian said, with those things like move outs or bulk items or things like that, the service might include one of those a month. But if you have more than that, let's say I have a need for more than that, but Brian can live within that limit, then the resident, I'm gonna have to pay above that to get that additional service. So basically, it gives a visual to, here's how much service the local government provides, and here's, anything above that, then the resident has to pay for that on their own. So if you have one of those big move-out piles, you could call and say, look, I'm gonna have all of this stuff out, and we could provide a remedy for that, whether it's a roll-off container, if it's a whole lot, or, it's an extra charge because of the quantity you're gonna have set out there. But usually it's a per item type of price, like for a refrigerator or a couch or something like that, above what's included for the standard rate that you'd pay for your taxes. So I think it really helps you to budget, right? Because you can say, okay, for the tax revenue we collect, we can, afford this type of service. And then anything above that the resident needs, they'll have to pay for on their own.
So a typical landlord would have to pay more money because they might have someone,
They may have to. If you need another cart, you can get another cart. Usually it's a percentage of what the first one is. So if the first one is, okay, it's $10 a month for the first cart that the city provides, it might be $8 for every cart you need after that if you have a big household or something like that and you need additional service. But it really helps to quantify what the city provides and then what people kind of to provide a level playing field from one house to the next, I guess I think of it. And then, if somebody needs more than that, they can purchase it on their own, so to
so if
speak.
someone moves out and you have multiple large items and it's a one-shot deal, the landlord pays for that separately. They call for a pickup and
Correct.
you have to put a truck out just for that pickup, so that would be pretty costly, I would assume.
May have to. It depends on what it is. We usually talk to them about, what do you think you're going to have? What quantity of material? And so, yeah, sometimes we would. But even with bulk collection, that's going to be done with a separate, it won't be done with that automated truck. So usually we're going to have a bulk truck in the community anyways. So if we know there's one of those bigger stops, usually it could be serviced by that truck that's handling bulk.
Maybe before we get to some other questions, I know there's others and I have some too, just for a starting foundation of where we currently are. Because I think the responses, there's material for us to review also and have a discussion with council, but a general response isn't probably going to help us. It's not going to help me get there. So I want to ask the city manager, our current contract in relation to the questions that are starting to come, what is, just to remind us and those that are here or watching, what is our current contract in relation to that? And then from what's being proposed?
well, currently, we've got unlimited residential collection at this point in time. I think, and part of what I was going to interject was if the council was inclined to consider going to, a cart for residential homes that, I think in a lot of cases that 96-gallon container is suitable. As Mr. Greavy alluded to, if you've got a bulk item, whether it's a couch or a washing machine, just let them know. They'll have somebody come by and pick it up. But like we had the discussion earlier this summer, the problem with some of the rental units, I think while it's very good for the single-family homeowner to have that availability of unlimited pickup, it's also had some abuse. And I think in some ways, I candidly will not be troubled by having a few of the landlords pay for an excessive service that the others are providing for them. So, but we do have unlimited pickup collection available.
That helps for a start point, and I think your point's what was one was, I'm sure, not myself, other council members would get to, and the fact that we do have those have taken advantage of the current process of collection, because we may have a duplex, it may be 4 apartments in certain houses, and of course, if you have 3 evictions, you have 3 piles. And that's something that should be accounted for as a person that's managing their property of multiple units. I don't have a problem with that. But there's some other questions that I may have, but I think there was one here, and I'll go to Brian?
Yeah. Well, how long is the current contract till?
I think it took effect March of 2018, 5-year contract, so there's still 3 years left on the contract, is my recollection.
June 23.
June 23, okay, that's right, we extended through the end of fiscal year, yep.
Also, a couple other questions. I mean, knowing that it is currently unlimited now, will there be a discount for going to this 96-gallon container? Knowing that it's going to save you guys some money, obviously, because the process is going to be quicker. Process is going to require less employees to pick up. So is that going to bring some savings across the board to us?
So you have capital costs for the carts, and then, again, this issue with the recycle to consider. Just being totally transparent, it probably would not net out to savings because of the capital cost and the issue with the recycle market.
Well, recycling aside, we're just speaking about just the refuse, not the recycling, correct?
Yeah,
Okay.
I think that, I mean, the capital cost is going to be substantial, but it depends, if we look at the term of the contract too, if we try to push all that into the 3 that is left, that's going to impact the cost versus if we push it back out to, so it goes a full another 5, that could help to spread some of that capital cost out. But again, I want to be totally transparent, just knowing the size of your community and the capital cost, there probably would be an increase in the charge to go to that type of service.
I guess my question would then be, what would be the incentive for my constituents to want this type of service?
Well, I think that's something we need to talk about, but it's kind of what Brian talked about. I think the biggest incentive, and I'm not the expert on this, you'd have to refer to your staff and your administration, is trying to manage that limited resource of funds that the city has to fund the program with. So again, if part of that service that falls outside of what the city can provide within the budget that they have and the revenue you have, that might be where that additional cost goes, are onto those people that need more service. So we'd have to look at it and see, because I don't have a concept of what your millage generates and that type of thing. But when we were talking about it and, the number of different types of properties have from single family home to rental properties, you might find that, look, we can outfit everybody with the means we have with a cart for each trash and recycle. And then you'd have a number of people that are going to be thereafter, because I got 3 units in a building or 4 units in a building, as you were mentioning, Mr. Mayor. Maybe those people have to contribute more than that because they're beyond the service that the community can provide for that millage amount.
Another question regarding this as well.
One more, and then
I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, go ahead, one more, and then
Okay.
I'll just make sure we have inclusion here.
Would we be able to reach out to other service providers, knowing that we're going to be changing over, see what kind of, bang for a buck we're going to get from them as well?
I don't think we'd be opposed to that.
Okay.
No, I thought my train of thought here. So this question for Mr. Pastou or yourself first, and then I'll get John's question, is just again foundationally so I understand. In our current contract, does our millage meet our our cost currently, as we're currently scheduled?
Yeah, I think we may, looking at Ed, but we're right there in the ballpark. Maybe we use a little bit of fund balance that we can afford to offset it, but it generally pays for itself, so
Okay.
Um,
Well, we're obviously getting a presentation, of other options and alternatives and information, and of course, as I hear changes to the recycling, but also desire of a cost change. And I just want to make sure, because since it was brought up about the millage, that it is the millage and the funds we have is meeting our current costs. John?
I have a question for our consultant. Good afternoon. What, how much waste, not recycling? I'm getting the signal from the back, thank you. How much waste does a typical single-family household generate per week?
I would have to look at the city's numbers specifically, but on average, it's in the ballpark of about a ton per household per year.
Per year, but how does that break down if each household had a 96-gallon container?
Yeah, generally speaking, one 96-gallon container will service each home once a week. And that's been my experience, and there are going to be some homes that have larger families. Maybe they need, a second cart. There are some homes that they don't generate as much material. Maybe it's a retired couple that eats out all the time. They're not going to fill up their cart every week. They might not even set it out every week. But on average, across the community, one 96-gallon cart is going to serve a community just fine. And then likewise, you've already experienced the recycling carts and how that works. I would add as an answer to your question about what's in it for the homeowner, for your constituents. My experience has been really two things. One is people just simply like carts better than trash cans and bags of trash. Some people, in my experience, have sometimes been reluctant. I was actually one of those. I happen to live in a community that we now have trash carts. I thought, I don't want a trash cart. I'm happy with my garbage can I bought from Home Depot, despite the fact that the bottom is wearing out and I'm going to have to buy another one. But once I got my trash cart, I actually decided I really loved it. So that's one thing that people are fond of. And then they also just generally like the way their neighborhood looks when everybody's got the same trash cart set out instead of the mishmash of various types of trash that people will have set out in front of their house. Now, there are certainly plenty of people for whom those aren't considerations and they don't want the trash cart, or they might think, I don't even have a spot where I want to keep this trash cart. I just want, my little trash can or my black bags of trash. So people vary, and it's what their tastes are. But across the average, I think people end up liking their trash carts, and they like the way their neighborhood looks when people have trash carts as opposed to everything else. But make no mistake, trash carts aren't free. And so there's going to be a cost associated with those, and the degree to which it costs the community is depending on how long that contract is. To do this in the context of your current contract and spread those capital costs out over 3 years, it would be a big jump, and it wouldn't make any sense, particularly if you're giving any consideration to trying to account for the recycling costs as they've changed. And Patrick was pretty accurate in his description. There's actually a whole lot more to it, and it could be a whole afternoon symposium on why the recycling markets are the way they are, and we don't need to get in that tonight. But if you're looking at trying to have any sort of consideration of that, the fact that you had a contract that was solicited during peak market times, and a market that didn't rebound like everybody in the industry expected, as well as considering carts, you're going to want to spread that out over a longer period of time, whether it's through an extension with your current service provider or considering going out to the marketplace. Certainly, the carts are a trend in the industry. Waste Management's number one competitor in the country, Republic Services, I don't know that they've bid a contract recently that didn't include carts for trash, and I've seen them refuse to bid on contracts if it wasn't using carts for trash. So you'll see some folks out there that'll be interested in it, but then there's going to be also a lot of players that won't have the capital costs for the carts, and so it goes both ways. But generally speaking, it really comes down to it's a safety issue for the haulers, it's a workman's comp issue for the haulers, for the community. It's what do your residents want? What do you want your community neighborhood to look like?
I think there's going to be some more questions. And I think John has some more, if I can ask the city manager, because going back fundamentally on the contract, was this an option available, or was it presented from Waste Management in 2018 regarding carts?
I don't recall it being,
Were you doing
issue
carts at
that
that
would-
time elsewhere?
oh,
Waste Management wasn't, yeah, this was bid in 17, in
So
the
I guess my
Michigan
question is,
market.
were you utilizing carts elsewhere that, in communities, and was that presented to the city back when we had our last contract?
Well,
No, well, we've started, latter part of 2018
It's all right.
is when we started to move towards the automated cart service. And each of the extensions that I've been a part of with contracts that we currently have, or new RFP proposals that we've worked through since the latter part of 18 up till today is when we've been presenting this program.
Okay. John, you have a question?
if I may, just prior to.
You have to if you're going to speak, you have to come to the motive. But we do have more questions, too.
So prior to Waste Management wanting to push carts, there were, they did provide carts in some communities, but it was when the communities actually asked for those carts to be part of the contract solicitation.
Okay.
So City of Novi is a good example. They went to carts a number of years ago, but they asked for it, and it wasn't something that, industry was pushing at the time.
Your Honor, I don't have any questions as much as I have some comments. One of the things that, when I'm taking a look at this, and I'm not an advocate right now of going back out for proposal or anything, because I think we really have to come to grips of what's going on with the whole issue of waste in terms of household waste and recycling. The one thing that I'm seeing, and it's kind of it's a national issue, if I'm not mistaken, is that the recycling market is a commodity market. It's based on who eventually is going to buy some of the recycled materials like the aluminum, the metal, the glass, the paper. And it's almost like, from a consumer point of view, if I want to use more electricity, I'm going to pay for it. If I'm going to turn on my furnace higher, I'm going to pay for it. If I turn on the faucet every day and I want to sprinkle my lawn, I'm going to pay for it because that's a commodity. I'm going to pay for it. I think we have to look at, as a council, we have to look at waste as a commodity. Okay, we have to start pricing it differently. And one of the things I think we need to take a look at is setting an index for recycling, that as the markets for recycling go up and down based on a national index, no offense, not to Waste Management, but something that is kind of like the cost of living that is readily available and published, is that we need to incorporate into our waste bill to our residents, our property owners, a commodity charge that reflects what's going on with the recycle market. Okay, because they can't predict it, we can't predict it. It's a global issue, but it's also a sustainable issue. It's the right thing to do to get rid of waste rather than dump it into a landfill. That's one issue that I have, is looking at recycling as a basic commodity. The other issue is, I don't have an issue going with the 96-gallon container, because I can tell you, when we used to use the recycle bins, if I put my recycling out and that evening we got a high wind, I found most of my recyclables, in front of my house, not in the bin. So the 96-gallon is much cleaner, much more sanitary, and obviously I watch the guy come down the street. He just goes down and he dumps them, and it's fairly fast and obviously safe because the guy's in the truck. The other part, though, that we have to take a look at, and there's two more issues that council needs to really consider, is something that I think the city manager has talked about, but we really haven't implemented it. With the number of rental properties that we have in the city, we need to start charging the rental landlords, and I don't want to give them a discount rate, all right? If they have 4 units, they should get 1, and then they have to pay for 3 at the same price that a single family owner is buying their bin, not at a discount, the same price. And we have the ability to do that because we know where most of the rental properties are. That'll help with our costs. The second thing is that we need to figure out a system where, at least on a monthly basis, we have a big item collection, okay? And I'm only thinking about this because a couple of weeks ago, personally, I had to throw out an area rug that we wanted, so we bundled it up and put it on the curb. That's not going to fit in a 96-gallon container. So, and I know other people in the community eventually throw out bigger items, but the idea of having to call Waste Management and say, well, I got a refrigerator to pick up or I got something large to pick up, I think the city needs to have a policy where maybe once a month, we have one truck that goes around the entire city and picks up large items to try to get an economy of scale. But that's going to be an educational issue for us to communicate to the residents. But Your Honor, waste is a big issue in any community, and we got to start thinking about it as kind of a delivery of a commodity. So it's awful hard to set a static price. And I wouldn't want to do it if I was in business, setting a static price for recycling, knowing that it's a global phenomenon in terms of what the commodity markets are. Because we could pay more, and then sometimes we could pay less. So
That's kind of the question where I was getting to, because the commodity is kind of, I was thinking the same way. I think John presented it well. So I look at the graph that you sent to us, and of course, that's the problem, is the market's not what it was. So we're asking for a change regarding that because of a cost issue for waste management. So on the other side of it, when it was at its peak, was there a reduction or return for revenue to the city? Or is there a reduction of cost?
Rarely do you see those in municipal contracts, but those are becoming more common as the hauling industry is moving to its customers and saying, we need some consideration because of this change in market. Then what I've recommended to communities is then the reverse ought to be true. When those things change, then there should be some compensation due to the city, and all that needs to be well documented, and the formulas all need to be built accurately. And what you speak, Councilman, to is really, going to a user charge, and there are many communities that do that. And so instead of having it as a millage-based system, which works very good in many communities, that another approach is to have either a straight user charge that can show up on the water bill, or a direct mail bill that can show up as a line item on the taxes. And some communities use a combination of both millage and users, but then you calibrate that particular homeowner's usage to the rate that they're going to pay. So if they're in a home that needs one recycling cart and one trash cart, here's what the rate is, and the hauler charges accordingly to the community. If it's in a unit that they have four dwelling units there and they need 4 carts, then they pay the user charge based on having 4 carts. And they pay accordingly, and the hauler charges the community accordingly. So it really does calibrate the usage to the cost, and it really allows people to function with a sharper pencil, because they are kind of paying attention to what they're paying based on what they use, as opposed to, I'll just set it all out there and it doesn't matter because it's all one price and it's in my taxes.
I just want to hand you a little note to keep the conversation going.
Okay. Okay, thank you. We have another session as well, but I think we still have some questions and might have from other council members. Andrew, you have a question? Because I have a few more yet myself, but you go ahead.
Thank you, Your Honor. The recycling offset adjustment, that is a per week suggested fee?
That's a monthly rate, isn't it? Yeah, that's a monthly rate. I would recommend that if you are going to give any consideration to that you allow Patrick and I to work with Waste Management to recalibrate that. I'd take issue with some of the numbers on there, but as Mr. Grieve said, that's just an example of a formula. It could be refined to really reflect what's actually happening in the marketplace.
Regarding the recycling as a commodity discussion, I believe unless there was some benefit to residents to recycle, or unless there was some revenue sharing with the funds that would be made from recycling, I think that charging people fees to recycle, especially to recycle more, it punishes the good actors, and everyone else is just going to say, well, if you're going to charge me not to recycle, I'm just not going to do it. I'll throw it all out in the trash, and we're going to send trucks around the city that are empty. I don't think that that's a good way to go. I would have a question for the city manager as to our obligation to work into the contract something like as has been proposed.
If I may, Your Honor, I took some notes on council members Michael Angeli's comments, and essentially I don't think Waste Management would have any objection discussing, a formula in which, as the market slides, that there's a cost share and also a revenue share if it gets to that point again, with the city related to that. I think that's the essence of what they're asking for. And certainly with Mr. Sapo's experience, he's got a good handle on the market and what would be a reasonable amount. The second part of it is that there is a benefit to charging, it as a commodity, particularly with our rental units. We know that they generated a significant amount more than a single-family residential unit, and therefore it'd be appropriate to charge accordingly. And then lastly, with the large pickup item, I think, there would be, as Mr. Conaway alluded to, just give us a call and let us know if you need a bulk item picked up, and we'll make it, schedule it for the route. My experience has been, a single day or a single week pickup brings everybody from elsewhere into the community with those items. And lastly, I think with it, if I may, just a final point with it, if we do, and the council is interested in having management, city administration continue a discussion with it, it does give us a chance to look at some of the other areas in the town. We've talked about the towns on front and some of their challenges associated with it. We can take a more comprehensive look at how the service is delivered and come back with council with, some alternatives with that, so.
The question?
I do, but I don't want to hog the conversation.
No, I see there's more, and
Yeah.
Brian and John have more, so you might as well get your other one in right now.
Go ahead.
What are some of the other variable costs that the refuse millage experiences? I'm familiar with, like, for example, the spoilage fee.
Yeah.
When we provide them with recycling that has unrecyclable material in it.
Well, we've got a pretty standard pricing in there. The only variable is the waste or the amount that's spoiled in the recycling aspect, and that's kind of a nominal amount. The only other thing I'm thinking off the top of my head is the sweet sweeping and vectoring of the sanitary, our storm sewer system is the only other thing that we put through that millage. Leaf bags, correct. Yes. Anything else, Patrick? Okay.
Yes, Your Honor. I just think if we're going to change the contract, then we should really review all of the alternatives that are out there. Because there's nothing saying that somebody can't be just as competitive and possibly provide the same service. So if we're going to do something like this, either we stay status quo and stick with the contract we have, because it's not costing us anymore, it's basically staying status quo for the city. I think we need to review all of our alternatives, not just one.
So I guess I'll just maybe some of a response. I don't know where this is at. Somewhere in the contract, is there language about revisiting or discussions? I don't recall right off. I don't have it in front of me. Or is it set for years, or is there, there's always
Most
disclosure.
contracts are going to have something where the parties can mutually terminate it if they're.
Okay. But not as far as revisiting costs or service.
Question to council, though, is if you go back out on the market, everybody's going to be looking at that recycling number, and it's going to be your leverage that you have now is not going to be what it is if you rebid it.
There's just my thought of what's in the contract that we don't have with us right now, but was it addressed anywhere in that? And I think the answer.
I think that, we could get back with council.
Okay. John, did you have a follow-up?
Yeah, I think it's mainly a comment regarding Councilman Felder's comment is that we can't forget that we also pay on a per ton basis to dump into a landfill. And at some point in time, I know those costs are fluid too because we're running out of landfill space. So we need to encourage recycling, but I will just ask the council, next time you get your utility bill, either your natural gas, your cell phone, or your electric bill, take a look because you're not just paying a base, you're paying for all these other incidental costs that are basically commodity charges that the utility companies are putting in basically to cover their cost of either the transmission of energy or the acquisition of energy. And you're paying that on a monthly basis, that's either a positive or a negative number, but the utility companies have gone to this type of a system years ago to cover the fluidity in the market. So just that's where waste hauling and waste management is going to go. It's got to be looked at as a utility, and there's got to be some costs in there to make appropriate adjustments based on market conditions, both ways, either for the provider and for us, the consumer, depending on what the fluctuations in the market are. That's all I have, Your Honor.
So, Michelle, and I can wait. Go ahead.
Vince, if we were to evaluate other companies for our waste, is that something we'd have to bid out again? Since we're in the middle of a
That's essentially
contract?
what it would be is, yeah.
Brian, follow up, and Andrew, I'll go to you after that, and then I will get my questions.
Currently, we don't have any of those costs. That's my whole point. For the next 3 years, our costs are right there. We don't have to add any additional costs at this time.
But there is a potential earlier termination of the contract too. Some kind of language. I don't know exactly what it is. but
So I'd like to
something-
know what that is.
Yeah, we'll get that to everybody
So
as well. the
it's really
council.
difficult for me to speak upon that if I don't
Right,
know what
yeah.
that language is.
I mean, it's been a couple of years since we had it, so I think everybody here is probably going to come up with other thoughts about the current contract and what the latitudes might or
Sure.
might not be. John?
I have a comment. I mean, I try to take a look at this both in public and the private way. Now, you're a businessman and you own a printing and publishing company. If the cost of paper goes up, okay, you have a contract with somebody to prepare so many pieces of print per year, but your cost of, they want recycling paper, but your cost of recycling paper goes up. Are you going to go to your client and say, go ahead and put it out for bid, or are you going to sit down and say, let's negotiate on the contract?
I don't have any contracts with any of my clients right now. to be
See, I
honest with
do.
you.
And I'd like to sit down with the client, and I'd like to negotiate a contract based on what's going on in the marketplace. So I think sometimes going out for bid could end up costing us more money than sitting
I'm
down
not
and
suggesting that we do
negotiating.
that. I guess basically what I'm suggesting is that we at least see all of our alternatives. That's all I'm saying.
Well, you're not going to see the alternative unless you put it out for bid.
So just so we don't go back and forth, I Andrew's question, I have mine as well, but I think, where we're at this moment with the current contract is it's not within the language, and I think we're being presented with the thought of adjusting that to revisit some of those costs and what would be in the future, as well as the delivery of service, as well as recycling, because those are the topics. So I really need to read the information to know what may be viable or not by current language. I think gives us a start point here. Andrew?
Yeah, I would not be supportive of putting it out for bid. I think that the reason we find ourselves here at this table is because we have a sweetheart deal and because Waste Management has some seller's remorse, much because the market was the way it was, and that was sort of beyond your control, and we don't fault you for that. Now, I am sympathetic, but at the same time, it seems like we're being approached, and the proposal is we want to increase your costs and decrease your service. Because right now we have an unlimited contract, which seems to be moving towards a 96 gallons of trash contract and a 64 gallons of recycling contract, as opposed to an unlimited contract. And that's certainly different. And by the way, we're going to increase your variable costs as well. So I am sympathetic, and we do want to work with you because we understand that these costs are increasing for you, whether or not they're increasing for us. But it's certainly a hard sell for us to make that to our residents who already, in their minds, paid for this. The millage went out. We signed the contract. It's done and over with, and should be, from 5 years hence. And that seems not to be the case. And I understand that this isn't the first time that you've come back here. We want to be team players, but at the same time, there's some concern on our part. It is a very important service to the city. It is a very important service to the residents. It's one of the most front-facing services that the residents experience in terms of their municipal services that are provided to them. So I think that, municipal refuse might not be an exciting topic, but I think it at least ought to be an important one for everyone in this room.
Thanks, Andrew. And I think that this is a start point to start this dialogue. So going back to John's comment earlier about the waste pickup, and we have the one pickup as it is. Unfortunately, that's not the case for some of the locations within our residents. And if we're just to pick one day, I think that we have other things would have to work out in this discussion, because there's those that unfortunately find themselves departing from an apartment, whether it's on their own desire or eviction, and when it's done, it just sits out there, and it's any day of the week. any week of the month. There's just going to be
Oh, yeah,
items
I
out
agree
there.
with
So we
that.
have to
Yeah.
figure that out as well. I agree I'll just say, residential homeowner. I think if they had they knew when that might be, that'd be one thing, but that's not the case for every residence location in our community. So those are things that we would have to figure out if we went to that or didn't have the unlimited as it currently is. And as I said, there are those that are taking advantage of it and not using it with the intent it was, and we need to address that as well. So I have the information here of course, we just received this, so I think I would like to review this as well. But I know the one pamphlet here that's the route to innovation, the automatic collection part of it. I always like to see the pictures that are in here because they say a lot and sometimes they don't tell you what it is. The two pictures that are on here aren't the same, but that's okay. One appears to be, I don't want to say in a township because there's no sidewalks, curbs, and cars, but there's also no cars. So my question really when I look at that, it's like two different photographs, two different locations, probably not the same service or the way in which it functions. My question is, with the automated collection and we have parking in the streets, and I know this picture over here says about the 3 feet, and that does complicate some things. Where you've instituted this, do they have any type of policies on street parking, alternate street parking, one side or the other, one street one way and the other? Is there anything that how is it operating for you where you currently use the automated collection, or is it a mix? Parking, no parking,
It's a mix.
regulations.
And really if there's no parking, obviously it's more efficient and more cost effective. But we have towns where there's parking allowed on the streets. I don't know if we have any in our book of business in the 3 states, Michigan, Ohio, and Indiana, where they prohibit parking on the street. The only community I can think of that has that in the metro area, and there may be others, but this one comes to mind, is I know Plymouth, Michigan, and we're not the service provider. They have an automated system, and they do not allow parking on the streets on trash day. It's kind of like snow emergency,
Right.
similar. But it's a matter of how much you want to affect the efficiency. So we can work it either way, parking or no parking.
Okay, because I can see that the picture that has the carts are out in the street. There's no cars there. So I'm trying to think if there are cars that are parked there, how is it they're going to be? Is there maneuverability? Are you able to do that in the locations? Or is that going to be something else we have to change or educate the public to push it further out, or because there'll be complications to start, of
I mean,
course.
it's a discussion on what you prefer as a community. Obviously, in a perfect world, there'd be no parking on the streets, but that's not always practical. And
Yeah,
Chris talked about some of
we
those
have
other areas that I'm
complications
not
for that.
familiar with that,
Yeah.
may be tricky for service, so you have to work something out there. But we do service communities, with tight grid streets that are automated and, that sometimes the operator might have to adjust a card to service it, but they're
So,
not going around behind the truck, which is really our concern. If they are getting out in those instances, it's on the curbside.
I'm sure there's occurrences then, it's too tight, and if it can't be automated collection, is there manual collection for those that are, I'll just say, challenged to get it from the curb or from between the cars?
I'm not sure if I'm following the question, but
If you can't collect it through automation, is there a collection or is it left and bypassed?
probably in those instances, you'd have to have a workaround. Maybe that bulk truck service is a certain street that just
Well,
automation
it won't be a
isn't
street, it'd probably be
feasible.
locations multiple across the city, which then, that's part of the conversation we have to have.
We haven't found
because
too
of-
many, but there may be.
Go ahead.
G Street? I said we have G Street.
Well, there's several that are barely get the car down, let alone the truck, and that's
Right.
tight. And then you have cars that park there as well. That's the items that we have to have a discussion as council as
Sure.
well. It's been brought up before about going to some type of parking system in relation to trash and street cleaning and all that. So I'm only bringing it up because it's not just a matter of saying, well, this sounds,
I
we can do this or not do this. We have to think of it. To go to carts and not be able to collect them through automation, then it defeats the purpose for doing it.
Correct.
Okay. Other questions from council? Andrew?
I think you do bring a good point, Mr. Mayor, about the parking, and I think think that specifically the areas that you have the toughest time and where the parking is the densest,
Yeah.
there's also the parts of the city where we can least afford to have residents put their cars somewhere else because there is such a scarcity of room.
There is no other place. There is no other place for some. Yeah, you're right. Well, I think we have all information to review, and I know the manager may come up with some discussion points for the council to kind of digest this, but also look at alternatives and where we might go or consider. Unless there's other questions from council, I think it's been helpful at least to have the discussion and get the information. Vince?
In conclusion, again, we started this with, no, I'm not looking for an answer tonight.
Right.
We just wanted to lay this out there, and we can talk a little bit further, so if you have more questions, certainly feed it to myself or Patrick, and we can get it on to Patrick and Brian and Mike as well for their thoughts and review. But I do think it does, if I may just say that, we have a unique city where we've got some interesting streets, and I'm not sure, that the automated system would work everywhere, but if they're running a bulk vehicle through, that you may have to incorporate that as part of the schedule. And those are the type of things that, would be a part of a negotiation as to how you would handle those specific items, so.
All right. Thank you, gentlemen. Thanks for
Thank
being
you
here this
very
evening.
much. Appreciate
That's
all
good
your time
discussion.
this evening and the
Thank you.
conversation. Thank you so much.
Thanks. Vince?
Your Honor, if I had the one other item talking about
Oh,
the
good. You got that.
the review of the lake effect of flooding. I'm not sure I necessarily want to go into that tonight. I
Yeah.
would rush it through.
Time-wise
so.
and stuff.
What's that? I can't do it. No, exactly.
Yeah.
And so I think we'd be better, and there's no
Yeah.
element of urgency to it tonight, but we'll bring it back for another work session.
That'd be fine. I know that we have some things to set up for the council as well, so, for the council meeting. But I guess if there's a minute, if council has anything for the manager. If not, we'll close the work session and begin